So what we're going to do today is how to build an intake bay on a wildlife pond. Stay tuned for the Any Pond Showcase. Hi guys, it's Mark from anypond.com, your trusted resource in the UK for ponds and water features, and thanks for joining me this week about the intake bay. If you haven't seen the video of this whole pond construction, check it out. It will be in the first comment of this particular video and also in the description. So what we're going to do is we're going to sink this pump vault into the ground right down here, believe it or not. So this is going to be the deepest part of the actual wildlife pond. Then we're actually going to put this on the top. So this bit underneath will actually be soil. And then what we're going to do is we'll put gravel on the top of here, which basically helps spread the suction for the water coming into the intake bay so the wildlife doesn't get sucked up. And the reason why we put on pump vaults is then we can use bigger pumps and we're not disturbing the wildlife. So what happens is the water comes around here. We're going to put in a big stone here or somewhere around this area to create that lovely curve of water opposite end to the waterfall or the water flowing in, and it basically comes in here. So let me start digging. So now I've got a bit of sun protection on my old barnet. I'm not going to get sunburnt. It's a fantastic day though, I'm not complaining. So let's start digging the pond. So now I've got down to the first shelf, we can work out where the pump vault's got to go and the aqua block's got to go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in the hole and then mark it out and then carry on digging. So now we've finished all of the groundwork for the intake bay. I'm actually sat in the bottom of the pump vault hole, and this is approximately 30 inches. What I've done is put the extension on. So a normal aqua block would come to here, and that would be fine if you were using a pondless scenario and you basically have the aqua block that sits on top of the foot of the pump vault. But what I've done here is I've extended it up one extension. So then what we can do is it's very easy to install and we're not having lots of rocks and stuff on top of the opening for the actual, to get in at the actual top. So you've got a lid on here. Let me put it in the hole and I'll show you. So the pump vault goes in the bottom of the hole and then the aqua block goes on the top. And as you can sort of see, the water comes in over here where I'm sort of sat on the first shelf, and it obviously will have a certain amount of gravel, and I'll put rocks up against this banking so this doesn't collapse. And basically it's a case of the intake bay is spread over this 2-foot area, and what I'll do is I'll build up rocks around the front of this, and it'll be a lot easier to get in there and maintain it. As you can see, you can just take the pump out and it's very easy to access it. And what I'll do is I'll cut this off. And what I've got is I've got a half aqua block. So basically I'll cut this down and then I've just used cable ties to cable tie the bottom on. So what we need to do now is basically take everything out, and then when we put the liner in, so we're going to put in an underlay, then the liner, then an overlay, and you want to create the hole slightly wider so it allows the underlay, the liner and the overlay to go in, and it's nice and snug because obviously you've got the pleats and folds going in. It's going into a very small hole, so it's going to be very cramped and tight in there. So you want 5 centimeters all the way around the pump bolt and the aqua block. Before I get rocking, the best thing to do is just to check that there's no stones or anything underneath. Before putting in the liner, you want to go round with a tamp or just check basically there's no sharp edges. Yeah, putting in a quality underlay will protect the liner, no problem, and you can just sweep it out and just use your shovel, get rid of the worst. It's very easy. So now we've got the liner in the hole, we're ready for the overlay, and you use small bits because it's a lot easier to go down in that deep, small hole. So now we've got the fleece in protecting the liner, so this is the overlay. We can now put in the pump vault and then the aqua block. Now we've got the pump vault and the aqua block in, we can come in with gravel and make it a nice secure fit. It is very nice and snug because we gave it 5 centimeters around, and as you can see, it's fairly snug and nice and neat. A lot of the time what I like to do is stand in it because then I can make sure that it's right up. And this is where you can appreciate how deep it actually is. So before I do too much rock work up here, what I want to do is I want to put the pipe in the hole for the pump bolt. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull the pipe from the stream, pull the liner back, and then work out whether I'm going to go in the bottom what I can do is, you can see that this particular fold, what I'm doing is I'm putting the fold the other side of the pipe, so if any water comes down the mystery waterfall, any water that comes down there can basically get pushed back into the pond rather than coming out and out onto the garden, because obviously this is going to be garden. I'm going to cut all of this liner off, so what I want to do is make sure that there's a waterproof barrier there, and that will stop it. Okay, so when you're fitting the pump to the pond, what you want to do is you want to basically make sure all these tag ends are nice and clean. If you want to cut it with the Stanley knife, and I always use hook blades. Takes a bit of getting used to, but what they are is they're like a parrot's or a claw, so it's a hooked blade. And I just find it a lot easier for cutting liner, for cutting pipe work. It's very easy just to clean it up rather than a straight blade, but like I say, you've got a bit of a learning curve how to use it rather than a straight blade. So the first thing to do when you want to install the pump inside the pump chamber is get all the components ready. All pond pumps in the UK don't come with a plug, so you need to put it on a plug onto the cable, and then obviously that can be plugged into your electrical installation. And I always recommend that you have a double socket or a socket by the pond, because then if anybody's coming to clean the pond, they can disconnect it rather than going inside the house and switching it on and off. There are a couple of other different things that you can have. You can have a plug and socket in line, so then obviously you can take it that way, but the best thing to do is have a double socket next to the pond, and then you can just literally plug the pump in. So that's the electric sorted. We all know how to wire a plug. If you don't know how to wire a plug, get an electrician to do it. And obviously the electric cable just comes in over the top here, so just keep plenty of cable on. You don't want to cut the cable back, because if you cut the cable too short, it will void the warranty on the pump, and it's just easy just to keep the the cable on. So there's a couple of different options about wiring pumps in. You can either use these sort of like rubber boots and basically use the fittings that come with the pump inside. There's also some people sort of like silicone the fittings underneath the water, because then they're you know, not solvent weld on, but we don't need that. What we're going to use is we're going to use solvent weld pipe. So again, there's a couple of bits. What you've got here is you've basically got a 2-inch male screw thread, and this is a female socket, again 2-inch, and it basically just adapts, just screws on nicely. Like I say, there's no need to silicone, and that goes in at the bottom of the pump vault, making sure we've got enough cable. And then what we do, I'm going to dry fit it all first, then we come up with a 90-degree bend, so that bit goes into the screw thread fitting. And then what we've got is we come up with another piece of pipe, and I always like to have a non-return valve. So when you've got water, when you turn it off, you don't want water coming back from the filtration system, especially if you've got a wetland filtration you know, system that you've put on yourself. If you've got a waterfall filter, it's not too much of a problem if a couple of buckets goes into the intake bay, but I always like to have a non-return valve on the pump side. What you've got on the non-return valve is you've got a flow indicator, so the flow goes this way. So basically making sure that it's a spring-loaded, making sure that it's in line and it's going out. Otherwise what will happen is if you push it that way, it will hit a brick wall, and you're going to have to dismantle it. You'd have to undo all of this, turn it around, and then put it back in. It's not a major problem. So make sure the flow is pointing up. And then what we want is an offcut in there. It gets easier when you're gluing it in. It's only when it's dry it's a bit tough. I might glue that in just anyway, just so it goes in better. Nice even coat. Like I said to you before, no need to scratch these pipes up. You can if you want, but you don't really have that too much of a problem. So let that go off for a second, and we can carry on working. Don't need a 90. Just wasn't sitting right. So that's why I basically do a dry run first. Because if I didn't do a dry run, I would never have known, and then we'd have had a problem. If you've got a lot of work to do, what you need to do is you need to mark the pipes, and then you know where to glue it. But with this, just this small amount, it's not a problem. Either that, or you can use a screwdriver to basically mark the pipes. So what happens is you don't basically glue it all in the wrong place. Also, you can use a marker pen. The last thing to do is to basically block up more of the hole and clean up as you go. now I'm getting on really well disguising the intake bay. What we've got is the water's going to come in through here. You can see I've put some irises and some stones around the pump bowl. Now what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to cover the aqua block with some 20 to 50 mil Scottish pebbles, and they're not going to fall through the aqua block. So let me put those on now, and then I'll carry on doing a bit more of the rocking process. So what these pebbles do is it basically stops the leaves and stuff going through into the aqua blocks. A few people pull these out and actually put a net on sometimes in the autumn. So what you can do is actually lay a net on top of the pebbles, or you can pull some of the pebbles out and then put a net on the top, whatever you want. But certainly it's a case of the intake bay draws all of the leaves, and it's a fantastic thing for reducing maintenance on wildlife ponds. Let me carry on rocking now. So there we go. Hope you agree that an intake bay on a wildlife pond is absolutely fantastic. It's very easy to pick off the bits and pieces. As you can see, you can just run a net round and just skim off all of the floating stuff. No problem at all. So any leaves that are coming down, we've got an oak tree above, it basically gets swept right in here. And what you can do is you can put a few stones and stuff in there just to basically make the skimming action a lot better. And as you can see, I've disturbed a little bit of soil, and look at it, it's coming right over the intake bay. It's perfectly happy for wildlife to walk over the stones, no problem. They're not going to get sucked into any pumps because it's in the intake bay, which is where I'm kneeling. You can have mechanisation with a wildlife pond, so you can have waterfalls, you can have streams, you can have pretty much what you want with an intake bay. My name's Mark, the Pond Advisor, and I'm here to support you dream, plan and enjoy ponds and water features. And if I've inspired you at all by this video about creating an intake bay, put me a comment in the section below and I'll appreciate it. Thanks for watching, see you in the next video.